Grandpa's lawyer handed me a check for $38 million. My dad grabbed it, struck a match, and burned it right in front of me. I didn't argue, I just smiled. Because what he destroyed wasn't the real thing at all. At the will reading, the truth came out. Imagine walking into a room after 5 long years, not to a hug or even a hello, but a deep, bitter glare. A look that said I was less welcome than a court-ordered termite inspector. That was my reunion with my father moments before the world as they knew it, and their carefully constructed lies utterly imploded. The conference room at Greaves and Halford reeked of lemon polish and unearned power. My sister Harper was already there, legs crossed, wearing that familiar smug smirk, like she just won a lawsuit blindfolded. And at the head of the table my dad, Leonard Greaves, sat like a CEO who'd somehow missed the memo that this was a will reading, not a shareholder meeting. Miss Halford, the family lawyer for decades, back when people still pretended I was part of their family, nodded at me. No one else did. No one asked about my last deployment, or if I'd even survived it without losing a limb. But honestly, I wasn't there for them anyway. I was there because I promised Grandpa Marshall I would be. That was it. Miss Halford cleared her throat, opened the folder and started reading. Her voice was calm, professional, like someone reading instructions for assembling a bookshelf that could end a marriage. To Harper Greaves, she began, the family property in Evergreen Lake and the antique Steinway piano. Harper blinked, probably expecting the entire company. To Leonard Greaves, Miss Halford continued, a set of first edition Hemingway novels and a $10,000 donation to the American Ethics Council made in his name. My father actually snorted. That's a joke, right? Miss Halford didn't flinch. She just turned the page. And to Rowan Greaves, she read, my granddaughter, my only confidant, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes all financial holdings, real estate, and voting control over Braden Tech Systems. Effective immediately. Silence. My dad's mouth tightened. Harper's smug smile cracked just a little. Then Miss Halford slid a check across the table to me. $38,246,000. Clean signed, dated. I hadn't even touched it before Leonard lunged. He snatched the check from the table as if it had personally insulted him. You think this brings you back? He hissed, and right there in front of the lawyer, in front of Harper, he pulled out a lighter and set the damn thing on fire. The check curled in his hand, the flame dancing up Marshall Greaves' signature like it was nothing. Harper gasped. Miss Halford simply leaned back in her chair, looking like this wasn't the first time she'd seen a man torch a fortune out of spite. Then my dad looked at me, a cold fury in his eyes, and said, that's what you get for walking out. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I just smiled. Not a happy smile though. More like the kind you wear when you've already seen the ending, and you're just watching everyone else catch up. Because what he burned wasn't what he thought it was. He didn't see the second envelope, still tucked inside my coat pocket. The one Grandpa had given me a month before he died. Wrapped in a napkin like it was some sacred text. Don't open this, he'd said, unless they try to burn it. Well, they did. So I would too. But not right away. First, I had to sit there in that polished room, soaking in their fake grief and their absolute rage, listening to Harper start talking about how, obviously something isn't right. My dad accused Miss Halford of forging the damn thing, like she was some criminal mastermind with a weakness for military granddaughters. They just kept going. Harper demanded a second reading. Leonard wanted an audit. I just listened, hands in my lap, feeling the heat of the fire fade off the table while they unraveled. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment and hit subscribe. Especially if your family's ever tried to gaslight you out of your damn name. The thing about people like them is, they only understand power when it's visible. They think if they burn the paper, they burn the proof. If they raise their voices, they win. If they erase you on paper, you stop existing. But they didn't know me. They didn't know what I learned in Kandahar. Or how many nights I stayed invisible for survival. They didn't know what Grandpa told me the day I left, how he said, you're the only one I trust to finish what I started. So when my dad flicked the ashes of that check across the table and told me I was out, I just smiled. Because I already knew I was the only one still in. Under the table, my fingers brushed the edge of the envelope still tucked in my coat, and I decided I wasn't leaving empty-handed. They could argue, throw threats, and set the room on fire for all I cared. My job was done the moment I saw the look on Harper's face when she realized the empire she thought she inherited had slipped right through her French manicured fingers. I walked out without saying a word. No door slam, no dramatic exit. Just the steady sound of my boots on polished wood. The courthouse lot was half empty, just like I remembered. Same cracked asphalt, same leaning oak tree by the gate. I used to climb that thing when I was 8 before Leonard told me girls didn't belong in trees. That was the first time I thought maybe I didn't belong anywhere. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just sat with the low hum of the road and the sound of my heartbeat trying to outpace my thoughts. The envelope was burning a hole in the passenger seat. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the kitchen, staring out the window at a street I didn't like but never left. The weight of it all was still settling, the inheritance, the fire, the silence. It felt too familiar, like that other silence from years ago, when I came home from my first deployment. It was Thanksgiving. I'd been gone for almost 18 months. Syria, border detail, convoy defense, you name it. I'd seen friends bleed out in sand and buried a journal under rubble when a roadside bomb went off 2 feet from my tent. I still had the ringing in my right ear. But when I came home, Leonard just said, "You didn't write." And that was that. No welcome home. No, I'm glad you made it back. Just a quiet judgment that filled the room like secondhand smoke. The house didn't look the same either. My room was gone, physically gone. Desk gone, bed replaced, bookshelf emptied. All my letters, photos, and graduation flag disappeared, as if I'd never lived there. In their place were 2 beige armchairs, a potted fake orchid, and a framed quote about calm waters and quiet minds. I remember thinking it looked like a dentist's waiting room, except this one had a door that used to say Rowan, and now said, guest. Harper passed me in the hall with a steaming mug of peppermint tea. She looked up, smirked, and said, "Don't be dramatic. You were gone for like a year and a half." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I left. I moved into a cheap apartment off the highway and worked part-time security at a logistics yard, while waiting for the VA to process my paperwork. Every few weeks, a wire transfer would show up from someone named M. Greaves, just enough to keep the heat on and gas in the car. No notes, no contact. But I knew. I always knew it was him. He never said much, but Grandpa Marshall saw me like nobody else. When I was 12 and wanted to enlist in junior ROTC, he showed up with boots that fit and a grin like I just passed some secret test. When Leonard said the military was a dead end for people who couldn't cut it in business, Grandpa said, "Maybe that's why your board meetings feel like war zones." He didn't pick sides. He picked me. And maybe that's why when he got sick and the calls stopped, I knew something was wrong. I visited once, just once, near the end. He was thinner, quieter, but his mind was still sharp. He handed me the envelope at Hillcross Diner over lukewarm coffee and a shared piece of lemon pie. "Don't open this unless they burn it," he said. I remember thinking he was being dramatic. I said something sarcastic. "What? You think they're going to set fire to $1 million check?" He didn't smile. "I think they'll try to erase you." And just like that, we both knew what he meant. I hadn't opened the envelope yet, but I was getting close. Its weight on the kitchen counter was getting heavier by the minute, as if it knew something I didn't. I stared at it for a long time, half hoping it would open itself and solve everything. But it didn't. I picked it up with both hands like it might bite if I moved too fast. The envelope was thick, sealed with red wax, the kind Grandpa always used for birthday cards, like it made them more official. I cracked it open with my thumbnail and pulled out a single folded sheet and a USB drive taped to the back. The paper was typed, notarized, and dated 3 weeks before he died. It was a trust transfer form. The check had been real, but it was just a decoy. The actual funds were already transferred. The real inheritance had been processed quietly and legally with a digital paper trail that would have made my father sweat through his $5,000 blazer. I stared at the account number on the bottom of the page. The last 4 digits were Grandpa's birthday reversed. He knew I'd remember. I plugged in the USB. No password, no delay, just a folder labeled inheritance. Inside, bank documents, legal authorizations, company control transfers, and something that looked like a draft of a second will. I exhaled, leaned back in my chair, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not safety, just confirmation. I wasn't crazy, but my relief lasted all of 5 minutes. I logged into my bank app to check the linked account. The app glitched. Then it gave me an error. Account not found. I tried another card. Declined. I typed everything slower, like being careful might fix whatever this was. Still nothing. It didn't feel like a glitch anymore. I called customer service. A guy named Dylan picked up and sounded like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Hi. Yeah. My account's saying I'm not in the system anymore," I said. "Can you check on that?" He asked for my name, birthday, and last 4 of my social security. I gave them all. Another pause. "It was certified by the registrar's office 2 weeks ago," he said. "You're flagged as legally deceased." I hung up before my voice cracked. Next stop, DMV. I waited an hour behind a woman arguing about a parking ticket from 2006. When I got to the counter, I handed over my ID. The clerk looked at her screen, frowned, tapped a few keys, and then looked up. "Ma'am," she said, "you're flagged as legally deceased." "I'm standing right here." "I get that, but the system doesn't. You'll have to file a correction through Vital Records." "How long does that take?" "Could be a few months." End of story. I walked out before I could punch a window. Back on the sidewalk, I felt like a ghost. People passed me like I was normal, like I still existed. But I'd seen enough bureaucracy to know. Once a system decides you're dead, it takes a hell of a lot to prove otherwise. And someone had made damn sure I disappeared. The sky was overcast. I pulled my coat tighter. Across the street, a woman stood watching under a line of bare trees. Sunglasses too oversized for the dim light. A blue silk scarf looped once around her neck. My mother's scarf, the one she said the dry cleaners lost 3 years ago. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there, still and silent, like a threat that hadn't spoken. I stepped into traffic and crossed slowly. When I reached the other side, she was gone. No footsteps, no trace. Back at my apartment, I pulled out every letter Grandpa had sent me over the years. Dozens folded into neat stacks tucked inside books, drawers, behind picture frames. His handwriting was steady even near the end. I found an old brass key wrapped in a faded handkerchief in one of the envelopes. The tag read, Langford Box 17. He gave it to me on my 18th birthday and said, "You'll need this someday." I guess someday had arrived. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed the key and walked out the door before I could talk myself out of it. Langford's storage wasn't far. 15 minutes through the quieter part of town, old storefronts, cracked sidewalks, mailboxes hanging by one hinge. I parked in front of a wine shop that hadn't been open since before the pandemic, and found the door between it and a boarded-up bookstore. No sign, just a black buzzer and a faded camera that blinked red once when I pressed the button. A woman opened the door. Late 50s, crisp ponytail. No name tag, no smile. "You have a key?" I handed it over. She looked at the tag. Box 17, checked a clipboard, then waved me inside without a word. The hallway was narrow and cold. Lights buzzed overhead like they hadn't been replaced since Reagan. We walked past 6 steel doors before she stopped at one, typed in a code and opened it. "Take your time," she said, then shut the door behind me. The room was windowless, silent, just rows of drawers set into concrete walls. I found box 17 halfway down, waist level, and slid it open. Inside was a black fireproof folder and a manila envelope. No dust, no smell, like it had been waiting. I sat down on the floor. The first thing I pulled out was a certified cashier's check. Same amount, same name, but this time with security features baked into the paper. The watermark shimmered when I tilted it. Real. Taped to the back was a tiny red sticker. Non-negotiable, copy burned. That told me everything I needed to know. The manila envelope had a sticky note in Grandpa's handwriting on the front. "Trust no one. Not even her." No name, just her. But I had a guess. Inside, printouts of emails, handwritten notes, legal drafts. He documented everything. Every conversation with his lawyer, every asset transfer, every board meeting agenda from Braden Tech Systems for the last 12 months. Some of the papers had Harper's name on them. Meeting minutes she attended. Contracts she signed. None of it looked casual. The final document was heavier. A flash drive inside a velvet pouch and a note. "Play only once and only when you're alone." I pocketed it and got out of there fast. Back at my apartment, I locked the door, pulled the blinds, and plugged in the flash drive. No label, no folders, just one file. M. Greaves. Final. Clicked it. Grandpa's face filled the screen. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered. He was sitting in the sunroom of his house in Hollow Bend. Light pouring over his shoulder like a soft filter couldn't save the truth. "If you're seeing this, Rowan," he said, "then they did what I thought they'd do." His voice was even. No drama, no shaking hands. He knew how to deliver a message. "I've watched them lie to your face, dismiss your service, turn your absence into ammunition, and I did nothing for too long. That ends now." He leaned forward slightly. "You're the only one who ever told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. That's why I left it all to you. Not just the money, the name, the company, the ground it's built on. I'm giving you the foundation because you know what to do with it." He paused. A long silence. "Your father will try to erase you. He'll say you abandoned the family. He'll weaponize your past. He'll pretend you don't exist. Let him." Then he smiled. Just barely. Because the only thing more dangerous than a man with money is a woman with receipts. The screen went black. No logo, no goodbye. I was alone in a dark apartment with the weight of a legacy, sitting on a cheap desk I had bought off Craigslist. I sat there a long time, not thinking, not planning, just breathing. I instinctively pulled the papers from the manila envelope and laid them across the floor. Line by line, signature by signature, cross-referencing every number, every name. In the corner of one printout was a contact name I hadn't seen in years. Phoebe Winthrop. My dad's second wife. Technically my stepmother, but only on paper. She vanished after Mom died, married Leonard within the year, and floated through life like a ghost with a perfect blowout and zero opinions. I hadn't thought about her in forever, but her name was there, right below a legal filing timestamp 2 weeks before Grandpa's death, which meant she'd been involved and not in the background. I circled her name with a red marker and underlined it twice. Phoebe Winthrop didn't show up in many conversations, but things usually went sideways when she did. She was static, never the center of the noise, just enough to distort the signal. The last real thing I remembered her saying to me was at my mom's funeral when she put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Your mother was complicated." That was her version of sympathy. I rechecked the timestamp. The filing was lodged through a small estate law firm in Charleston, connected to a property Grandpa had held in trust for over 20 years. I never knew about that one because my name had never been on any deed until now. I opened the folder from the USB again, and found a second address listed under confidential holdings. Langford. Not the vault I had just visited, a second one I hadn't heard of. The file said, Box Array 6 billions. Entry via security list only. I paused. My name was printed next to the line. Access level confirmed. Langford Security Vaults was 3 hours outside the city. The place looked more like a Cold War museum than a storage facility. Steel gates, motion sensors, guards with actual firearms. It's not the place you walk into with questions, unless you already have the correct answers. I drove out just before noon, parked outside the perimeter, and walked in with nothing but the old key, the printout, and nerves I hadn't felt since Kandahar. The woman at the front desk wore a navy blazer with no name tag. She scanned the key, then looked me up and down. ID. I slid it across the counter. She scanned it, then looked up. You're dead. Only legally, I said. I'm working on that. Her lips twitched like she wanted to smile but knew better. She typed something else then nodded. Follow me. I did. Down another corridor. Colder than the first vault. More cameras. The silence was surgical. She opened a door labeled Array 6 Billions and motioned me inside. No words. This one didn't look like a bank vault. It looked like a private evidence locker. I found box 6 Billions on the middle shelf. Opened it with the key. Inside was a black briefcase and a sealed manila folder with my name in block letters. No title, no stamp. Rowan Greaves, underlined once as if it didn't need explaining. The briefcase clicked open with the old push-button latches. Inside, a deed, a corporate ownership ledger, a single flash drive in a velvet-lined pocket. The deed was for the Hollow Foundation, listed as a non-profit veteran support center located on the grounds of the Charleston property. The name on the document, Rowan Greaves, Executive Director, sole owner. Underneath it, legal filings confirming that all holdings from Braden Tech's Humanitarian Division were officially transferred to Hollow 6 weeks before Grandpa died. Quietly. Completely legal, no press. The ledger showed something else. Complete ownership of Braden Tech's executive shares had been reassigned through a trust mechanism that bypassed the family board. He'd handed me the company. Silently. Without waiting for their approval. The flash drive lit up blue when I plugged it in. Inside, another video file, no title. I hit play. Grandpa was sitting in the same sunroom, this time with files stacked around him. If you made it to Vault 2, he said, then you figured out the first one wasn't the whole picture. He reached off camera and held up a document. This is the transfer of ownership for the humanitarian arm. The part 1 built from scratch after Vietnam. The part Leonard never touched because he couldn't monetize it. I left it to you because you never asked me for anything, but you showed up when it counted. He looked down briefly, as if to choose his following words carefully. I couldn't stop what they planned, but I made sure they couldn't erase you. You don't need their permission. You never did. All you need now is proof they forged your name. That's your keystone. Everything else will fall after that. He looked straight at the camera. Don't flinch, Rowan. They're going to come hard. The screen went dark. I sat there, surrounded by a dead man's voice and a war he'd left for me to finish. I slid the flash drive back into its pouch and called the one person I never thought I'd need. Phoebe didn't answer on the first try or the second, but on the third call, she picked up with that polished, rehearsed tone, like I was a reporter asking about her skincare routine. You knew, I said. A pause. Just air between us. I didn't sign anything, she replied. I want that on record. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. You helped file it. I handed Leonard an envelope. I didn't ask what was in it. He said it was an insurance document for estate protection. I believed him. That wasn't a lie. That was how she survived in that house. I waited. He had a notary come by. A friend of his. She stamped everything. I thought it was something boring and complicated and rich people legal. And I pressed, how long ago? 3 weeks before your grandfather passed. Did you see a death certificate? Another pause. A longer one. Yes. You read it. Your name was on it. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't thank her. Just hung up. Back in my apartment, I opened my filing cabinet, the one I hadn't touched in a year, and pulled out my original social security card, birth certificate, and passport. All still in my name. I took them straight to the county registrar's office and asked to speak to someone about a fraudulent death record. The clerk took one look at my paperwork and frowned. Then she looked at her screen. I don't know how this happened, she said. But your file was closed by court order. What court? Family Estate Division. The order came through as part of a sealed emergency motion. Very rare. Can I see it? No, she said. Not unless you get a judge to open it. How long does that take? She looked over her glasses. Depends on who you pissed off. I walked out with a headache and a printout that confirmed what I already knew. Someone had filed to erase me legally, and someone else had stamped it like it was routine. Back at home, I dug into the printed emails from the vault. One name kept popping up. Dr. Cambria Funny. Retired physician, used to do house calls for elite families, including mine. The email showed she'd verified long-term mental instability and identity confusion in a letter addressed to the estate court. I had never met this woman. Her phone number was disconnected, but her address was still in the system, one town over. I drove there that night. The house was small, overgrown, and peeling paint. No car in the driveway. The lights were off, but the mailbox had mail dated 2 days earlier. Someone still lived here. I knocked. No answer. So I sat in the car and waited. 30 minutes later, a sedan pulled up. An older woman got out with 2 grocery bags. The same name was on the license plate frame. Dr. Funny. She saw me and froze. I got out and walked up slowly, hands in my jacket pockets. I'm not here to threaten you, I said. But you signed something about me, something false, and I need to know who told you to. She blinked hard like her brain was buffering. Was it Leonard Greaves? She didn't answer, just nodded, slow and shameful. He said you were mentally unwell, she whispered. Said you'd suffered psychological damage overseas, that you believed things that weren't real. He made it sound tragic. And you believed him. I signed what he gave me. I didn't know they'd actually file it. You thought he wanted fake medical records for fun? I thought it was a formality for inheritance cleanup. He said you'd agreed to it. I didn't bother arguing. Get a lawyer, I said, and don't answer any more of his calls. She didn't respond, just backed toward her door and locked it behind her. It wasn't guilt that burned most. It was how easy it had been for them. How casual. Signing me off the planet was no different than renewing a car lease. And somewhere in that paper trail, I knew Harper's name was waiting. I drove straight to the only person I trusted who'd know how to burn it down without leaving a fingerprint. Sylvia Marsh answered the door in sweatpants and a threadbare Harvard Law hoodie, holding a slice of cold pizza and a mug of black coffee that smelled like it had been reheated twice. Her place was cluttered, lived in, and full of files that probably could have collapsed a senator or two if anyone knew where to look. She took one look at me and stepped aside. This better be illegal. It is. Good, she said and handed me the pizza slice. Eat. You look like a ghost with a grudge. I know. I sat on her busted leather couch while she opened the folder I brought. She flipped through the documents like counting cards at a casino she owned. The death certificate, the false medical report, the estate filings, the ownership transfers, the check, the flash drive. She didn't speak until she reached the part with Harper's forged signature. Classic, she muttered. They filed it through a Delaware shell. Sloppy. Did they think no one would check? I think they didn't expect me to come back. She raised an eyebrow. They filed you dead. That's not coming back. That's biblical. Sylvia used to run a nonprofit legal aid group for veterans with dishonorable discharges. She'd represented soldiers falsely accused, wrongly imprisoned, and gaslit by their command. She once sued the Pentagon over a housing scam and won. That was before she lost funding, quit the nonprofit world, and started working out of her living room on cases the real firms didn't want to touch. I'll need access to your VA files, she said, and anything you have from the military. Deployment orders, discharge papers, especially anything signed. I handed her a second folder from my bag. She scanned it and nodded. This proves you're alive. Proves you didn't agree to squat. And if we can match this signature to the one they used on the stock transfer. She trailed off. You can take them down. No, she said. You can. I hadn't expected that. You want revenge or justice? She asked, sipping the worst smelling coffee I'd ever encountered. Because they don't come in the same box. What's the difference? Justice follows the law. Revenge breaks it. I didn't answer. She went to her computer, typed for 30 seconds and then said, Braden Tech's board will be vulnerable if we hit them at their annual audit window. That's in 11 days. If you want to blow this up, that's your shot. I want it airtight, I said. No spectacle, no scandal, just facts and fire. Sylvia grinned. Facts and fire. That's going on my gravestone. She pulled out her phone and called someone named Miles. Crow, she said. Got a live one. Military, inheritance, fraud, forged death, the works. Meet me at the office. Bring the clean laptop. She hung up and turned to me. Miles is a forensic doc analyst. Worked intel. He's got the kind of eyes that can spot a forged signature at 50 yards, and he won't blink at who we're going after. I nodded. What do you need from me? Full authorization. Everything. I'll draft it up. In the meantime, don't talk to anyone. Don't post. And for the love of God, don't try to play hero. This isn't the part where you go rogue. It's the part where you let me build the kill shot. I leaned back on the couch. My hands were still clenched. Sylvia watched me. You all right? I thought I was done being in wars. She shrugged. Family ones are worse. Fewer rules. I left an hour later with a burner phone, a folder labeled Temp Legal Hold, and a direct line to Miles Crow, who texted me exactly 2 things before I even got home. We'll verify every doc, but first we find the signature that buries them. I didn't respond. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and stared at the steering wheel. The last time I'd followed an order this precise, I was wearing body armor and praying no one tripped an IED. Now I was wearing a hoodie, carrying a USB drive, and about to incinerate my entire family name legally. The war had already started. This was just the first real shot fired. I tossed the burner phone on the passenger seat and drove straight to the storage unit, where I kept what no one else knew I still had. Unit 11B sat at the end of a crumbling row of metal garages behind a busted fence in South Brighton. No cameras, no contracts with any national chain. Just a guy named Dennis who ran the place and didn't ask questions as long as your rent cleared. Mine. Always did. Inside the unit, a black plastic footlocker, military issued, scratched and dented like it had stories to tell. I cracked it open and pulled out my deployment binder orders, discharge papers, mission reports, and most importantly, hard copies of my signature from 6 years of federal paperwork. No digital trail, no edits, all original. I drove straight to Sylvia's office and laid everything on the table. Miles Crow was already there, mid-30s, wire-framed glasses, ponytail, and a resting face that said he once got interrogated and enjoyed it. He gave me a polite nod like we were coworkers in a crisis. No small talk. He picked up one of the documents, held it under a UV lamp, and then pulled out a separate folder labeled Braden Tech Equity Transfer, GI Trust. Inside were the documents Harper had filed on my behalf. 2 pages in, Miles grunted. See this? He pointed to the loop in the G of my last name. You do this little hook on the downstroke consistently. But here. He flipped to the fake transfer doc. Flatline. No hook. Also, the signature is scanned. You're sure? I asked. He didn't look up. It's a lift. Someone pulled it from a military DD-214, my guess. The 2018 discharge packet. It's public enough. Sloppy execution, though. Can you prove it? He snapped a picture and then pulled up software on his laptop. Side-by-side comparison, line pressure analysis, pixel compression levels, overlay render. In under 2 minutes, he said. I can write the affidavit tonight. This would fall apart in court in 10 minutes. Sylvia handed me a printout. Here's what that forgery gave them. Harper sold 40% of your voting shares last quarter to a holding company tied to Leonard's real estate trust. They're trying to roll the company under full family control before the next board vote. My jaw tightened. She signed with my name. She signed with a fake version of your name during a time when you were legally deceased. It's not just a civil problem anymore. What is it then? Miles answered. Wire fraud, document fraud, possibly conspiracy. If Leonard coordinated the notary, definitely perjury. And if the assets cross state lines, we're in federal territory. Sylvia leaned forward. This is the thread. We pull it right and the whole sweater comes undone. I stared at the documents in front of me. Seeing myself on paper, my name, my handwriting was strange, but knowing none of it came from me. Like watching someone wear your skin and wave from a balcony you never stepped on. Sylvia added. I filed a preliminary injunction to freeze the company's board action, but it won't stick unless we get a judge to see this evidence firsthand. What do you need me to do? She looked me dead in the eye. Stay alive. Stay quiet. And don't lose your temper. This only works if they don't know you're building the case. Let them think you're still stunned. Miles handed me a flash drive. Backup of all my findings for your records. I put it in my pocket. The whole thing felt too neat, too logical, and that was precisely what scared me. My family didn't operate in logic. They operated in chaos, distraction, and narrative. I wasn't playing defense anymore, and they'd feel that soon. But first I needed one last piece. A thread left hanging, one she never meant for me to see. I pulled up the interview request Harper had denied 3 months ago, and called the reporter she ghosted. His name was Nash Wilder, a veteran investigative journalist who'd won a regional Emmy for exposing a defense contractor bribery ring in Arlington. He answered on the first ring like he was expecting bad news. This is Nash. This is Rowan Greaves. You asked my sister for comment in April. There was a pause. Quick, sharp, loaded. You're the one Braden Tech filed dead. That's me. Interesting. What changed? I'm not dead. That'll do it. We met that night in a diner just off Route 15. He wore a denim jacket and had a recorder on the table before I sat down. No pretense, just journalism. I laid it all out. The forged death certificate, the fake signatures, the ownership grab. I showed him the affidavit from Miles and the filing Sylvia had started. I didn't hold anything back. Nash didn't blink. He just kept jotting notes, tapping on his phone occasionally. I've heard whispers, he said. That Leonard's prepping to take Braden Tech public. You can't do that clean if a $38 million asset transfer is sitting on a forged corpse. Exactly. Do you want this public, or just used as leverage? I want the truth to work harder than their lies. Copy that. He didn't promise a timeline. Didn't say when or where. Just told me he'd run it clean and tight. 2 days later, the first article dropped. Daughter declared dead. Cut from $38 million inheritance. Braden Tech family power play unraveling. It hit the morning cycle like a nail through the throat. By noon, a second wave followed. Blogs, comment threads, veterans groups, corporate gossip pages. My inbox exploded. People I'd served with sent screenshots with laughing emojis and, is this for real? Texts. I didn't answer any of them. That afternoon, Leonard went live on a local news station trying to do damage control. He sat in a navy suit with his American flag pin and carefully trimmed beard, speaking in the voice he used when talking to investors. Warm, confident, manipulative. We're saddened by the misinformation being spread. Rowan has had difficulties since her return from overseas. The family has done its best to support her through that process. Sometimes people lash out when they feel isolated. They rolled old footage of me in uniform walking off at 30, sand still on my boots. Then they showed a headline from years ago. Civilian casualty inquiry. Sergeant Greaves refused strike order. That was their angle. That I was unstable, disgraced, dangerous. No mention that I refused to target a building full of non-combatants. No mention that the inquiry cleared me. No mention that the only reason I'd even been reported was because the commanding officer's cousin ran the contractor supplying the airstrike. They weaponized my past like it was a campaign ad. Sylvia called me before I could throw a chair through my television. Breathe, she said. This was always coming. They're rewriting history. They're buying time. And that means they're scared. Miles sent a message 5 minutes later. Let them overplay the receipts. Don't blink. He was right. The problem with men like Leonard was that they thought power made them invisible. But they'd never faced someone trained for years to disappear and strike in silence. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't their problem. I was the perimeter breach. And that made them sloppy. By 9 p.m., I had 3 anonymous tips in my inbox. All former Braden Tech employees. 1 worked in internal audits. 1 handled digital assets. 1 left with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement she was about to break wide open. The 3rd one was attached as a PDF. Asset transfer logs, transaction trail, fake consulting invoice signed by Harper Greaves on behalf of Rowan Greaves. Same forged signature Miles had flagged. They hadn't stopped with the stock. They'd been moving funds too. Sylvia forwarded the file to the district clerk, requesting an emergency hearing. I stayed up, reading every line. On page 17 there was proof of payment to a legal courier service. 1 name listed as the contact for coordination. Phoebe Winthrop. I closed the file, grabbed my coat, and headed out before the rage settled into something quieter. The air outside was brittle. The kind of cold that made everything feel sharper, more personal. I didn't drive. I walked 15 blocks to a narrow brick building where Nash Wilder worked nights out of a second-floor office above a used record store that hadn't sold anything since 2009. The buzzer didn't work, so I banged the glass. He opened the door with his sleeves rolled, a pen behind his ear, and a look that said, "Please tell me you've got something better than your last bombshell." I handed him a flash drive. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask what was on it. Just plugged it in, loaded the video, and watched. Grandpa filled the screen. No intro, no preamble, just him sitting in that sunroom again, files in his lap, voice steady, like this was a business meeting with history on the line. "If you're watching this," he said. Then Leonard did what I couldn't stop him from doing. His face was calm, not bitter, just done. He was never supposed to inherit Braden Tech. He never earned it. He never understood what it was for. He saw contracts. I saw responsibility. He saw numbers. I saw people. The light hit his shoulder just right. No drama, just clarity. I changed the will because I saw what Rowan had become. Not perfect, but principled. And when you build something with the intention of it outliving you, you don't hand it off to the loudest bidder. You hand it off to the person who won't sell it the second you're in the ground. He paused. Rowan is the future of this company, this family. And if they try to bury her, let this serve as record. I changed everything of my own free will. No pressure, no manipulation, just a choice made with both eyes open. He leaned forward closer to the camera. They're going to lie. And they're going to lie big. But the truth doesn't blink. Then the video ended. Nothing flashy, no fade out, just black. Nash looked at me. "You want this live?" "Everywhere." He didn't hesitate. 15 minutes later, the clip was on 3 platforms, linked in a follow-up article, and attached to a press release with quotes from 2 legal analysts and a former Braden Tech employee who'd agreed to go on the record. By midnight, it had over 300,000 views. By morning, Leonard's PR team was in complete scramble. His legal rep issued a vague statement, calling the video emotionally charged but irrelevant to formal legal processes. That was their play. Minimize and wait for it to blow over. Except it didn't. By noon, half the defense tech community had picked it up. Military blogs, Reddit forums, stock chatter rooms. Everyone had a take, and most of them weren't flattering. Harper wasn't there. Probably because she knew the look on his face meant he was about to make things worse. "I understand emotions are high," he said. "But family matters should be resolved privately." Then came the mistake. He added, "This company was never meant to be run by someone with a history of mental instability and unverified claims." There it was. The mask dropped. Nash clipped that line and posted it solo. By 6 p.m. it had 2 million views. People didn't just turn on Leonard, they dragged him. Veterans called him out. Shareholders questioned the ethics clause. Former employees posted anonymously about how he ran meetings like military tribunals with a god complex. Braden Tech's board issued a rare statement confirming a temporary freeze on asset movement, pending an internal review. Sylvia called me after the statement went live. "You just cracked the damn wall," she said. Now all we need is the hammer. I showed up to court in all black and didn't smile once. No lipstick, no jewelry, just clean lines, polished boots, and the silence filling a room before a controlled detonation. Sylvia told me to look like leadership. I told her I already did. Leonard arrived with a fresh haircut, a custom navy suit, and 2 attorneys from a corporate catalog. His face was tight, no smirk, no eye contact. Sylvia told me once she'd seen Judge Kinley dismiss a millionaire mid-sentence for dramatic tone. That's the kind of judge we wanted. Sylvia stood as our case was called. We are here to contest the suppression of legal identity and the fraudulent execution of financial documents related to the estate of Marshall Greaves. As per routine, Leonard's lawyer, a smooth-talking guy named Benson Price, rose with a rehearsed sigh. Your Honor, this is a family dispute dressed up in courtroom drag. The decedent's will was read, reviewed, and witnessed. My clients, Mr. Greaves and Miss Harper Greaves, acted entirely within the bounds of estate protocol. Kinley didn't blink. Then you won't mind if I see the video. Benson's eyes widened. Video. Sylvia tapped her tablet. The lights dimmed. The monitor lit up. And there he was. Grandpa, calm as ever. If they're watching this, he said, it means they tried to bury her. But this isn't just money. It's memory. It's legacy. And if they tried to burn hers down, this is how she comes back. No one spoke when the clip ended. The silence was clean, heavy. The kind people respect. Kinley folded her hands. What's the defense's position on this testimony? Benson cleared his throat. It's emotionally compelling, Your Honor, but ultimately irrelevant to legal standing. Sylvia raised a brow. Then perhaps the forged signature, the falsified death certificate, and the wire fraud logs will provide better context? She handed over a thick binder, all documented, time-stamped and cross-verified, including a sworn affidavit from the doctor who was misled into certifying Miss Greaves's death. Harper squirmed in her chair. Leonard leaned forward like he wanted to break the table in half. Kinley flipped through the binder for a full 30 seconds. That doesn't sound like much unless you're the one being exposed. Then came the slow nod. Let the record reflect, she said, that I find the evidence of identity suppression and signature forgery credible and serious. Benson stood again, desperate. Now, Your Honor, even if there was confusion, these events unfolded under the belief that Miss Greaves had abandoned her role in the family and company. Kinley didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You didn't just try to manipulate this court, she said, turning her attention to Leonard. You tried to erase a person, a veteran, your daughter. Then to Harper, and you facilitated it. Harper opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Kinley's gavel hit once. This court recognizes Rowan Greaves as the sole legal heir to Marshall Greaves' estate, and the rightful controller of Braden Tech Systems, and all associated assets. Benson tried to interject, but Kinley cut him off with a look that could crack a windshield. All transfers, sales, and actions made under false authority are hereby frozen pending criminal investigation. I didn't flinch. Didn't smirk. Just stood still. Like every muscle had been waiting for this moment to exhale and didn't quite know how. Leonard stared straight ahead. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might break. Harper looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't remember how. Sylvia leaned over and whispered, You just took the throne, Greaves. Outside the courthouse, the press was already gathering. Nash had a camera crew on standby. I walked right past them. No statement, no comment, no spin, just the sound of my boots on stone and the weight of my name finally sitting right. I took the long way to the cafe, letting the cold wind slap some of the courtroom weight off my shoulders. Harper picked a neutral spot. Midtown Cafe, overlit, overpriced, full of professionals pretending to be busy. She was already there when I walked in, sitting by the window with 2 coffees on the table. She hadn't touched either. When she saw me, she stood too fast, unsure if she was greeting me or bracing for impact. I sat down without speaking. I didn't know, she blurted. About the death certificate, about the will. I swear you signed it. I thought it was standard paperwork. Dad said it was part of the restructuring. I just signed where he told me to. I stared at her. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, like the months of pretending hadn't sat well on her. I was scared, she said. He said if I didn't help, I'd lose everything too. So you chose survival. Her hand shook slightly as she wrapped them around the coffee cup. I didn't think you'd fight. You always just left. That's because I knew what happened when I stayed. I didn't mean for it to get this far. But you let it. Harper blinked fast. You have to believe me. No, I said. I really don't. She nodded, looking down at her lap. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I thought I was protecting what was ours. Ours never included me, Harper. Not once. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. You didn't just sign a form. You signed me off the map. You stood there and watched them light it all on fire. I was stupid. No, I said. You were careful. Stupid would have been forgivable. She wiped at her eyes with the cuff of her coat. So what now? I took out my phone and set it face down on the table. It had been recording since I sat down. She didn't notice. I'm not pressing charges, I said. You'll get whatever's fair under the law, but you don't get access. No seats at the table, no stake in the company. You're not part of the rebuild. Her voice cracked. I'm still your sister. And I'm still alive. That didn't seem to matter much a few months ago. I stood up. Rowan, please. I looked down at her. At the half-finished version of someone who once braided my hair before school and whispered secrets under the covers. But there was nothing left there I needed to hold on to. You picked your side, I said. And now you get to live with it. Outside, the wind had picked up. I zipped my coat and kept walking. Past the train station, past the people with umbrellas fighting the wind, past the places we used to eat together. None of it felt like it belonged to me anymore. And that was fine. I wasn't trying to reclaim what was lost. I was building something new with hands they hadn't broken. And Harper, like the rest of them, would just have to watch. I stepped off the sidewalk and crossed the street without looking back. Keys already tight in my hand. The building was small, red brick, squat between a florist and a shuttered laundromat. The windows were tall but scuffed, like they'd been ignored long enough to forget they ever let in light. The front lock clicked open easily. I stepped inside. Dust, silence, the kind of emptiness that made room for something new. This was it. The address on the envelope Grandpa had marked. Start here. It used to be a print shop back in the 60s. Then a piano studio. Then nothing. Now it was mine. I sat cross-legged on the floor, took out the last envelope from the vault, and opened it slowly. Inside, a sketch of the floor plan in Grandpa's hand, a half-completed business license application, and a note with 4 words underlined. Make something they can't erase. So I did. I called the county office and fast-tracked the license. I reactivated my LLC from 3 years ago, Greaves Insight Group, which had never really taken off but never officially died either. Within a week, permits were filed, contractors scheduled, paint colors picked. 2 weeks later, the sign went up. Greaves Foundation. Veterans. Women. Forward. It wasn't flashy. No ribbon cutting. No press photos. Just me and a guy named Dean, who'd served 2 tours in Kandahar, and now ran a nonprofit building rehab program for women vets. We drank burnt coffee and signed the paperwork on the front desk counter. What are you hoping to do here? He asked. Build what I needed 10 years ago, I said. Dean nodded like he understood more than I was saying. The Foundation's first project. A legal fund for female veterans navigating discharge disputes and post-service housing instability. Second, a mentorship program connecting young women in ROTC with seasoned female officers. I called it Operation Second Voice. Grandpa would have hated the branding but loved the fight. Sylvia joined the board pro bono. Nash ran the press release through his network. Miles helped set up the data security infrastructure because I trusted 3 people in this world and he was still one of them. The money wasn't an issue. I had control now. I didn't need to fight for scraps. I needed to make the scraps into something sharp enough to cut through. And for the first time the work felt clean. No more boardrooms full of knives and smiles. No more pretending I belonged to people who only saw me as leverage or liability. One morning I received a letter from an old P.O. box I hadn't touched in years. No return address, just a crumpled envelope with handwriting I'd know anywhere. Inside, a photo of Grandpa and me at age 7 sitting on the porch. Both of us wearing matching paper crowns he'd made from birthday gift wrap. On the back, in his handwriting, takes more than fire to stop royalty. I pinned it to the corkboard in my office. No frame, just thumbtacks. Clients came, partners signed on, the space filled. Not all the wounds healed. Something stayed bruised. But the building stood, and that was enough. One night, I stayed late to clean up after a vet group session. Empty coffee cups, old paperwork, chairs out of place. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and stood outside for a second. The street was quiet. The sky was clear. I didn't feel like a daughter or a soldier or a ghost. Just felt solid. Like I'd finally stepped into the version of me they never saw coming. And there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. I reached for the deed still tucked in my bag, and walked toward the courthouse steps like I owned every brick beneath my feet. The building looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the silence. No reporters, no family members faking concern. Just old stone, worn down by years of other people's stories that never made the news. Inside, the clerk barely glanced up before stamping the final confirmation. Transfer of deed. Effective immediately. 1 copy for the county, 1 for my file, 1 in my hand. The seal gleamed under fluorescent light. Official. Ugly. Beautiful. I walked back out without stopping. No photos, no announcements, just my boots on concrete and a document that meant something more than property. It meant they couldn't rewrite me anymore. On the sidewalk I paused and turned to face the courthouse. I held the deed before me, not high like a trophy, just enough to see it against the stone, and took 1 photo. No smile, no caption, just proof. I turned the screen off and slipped the phone into my pocket. 5 blocks later, I reached the new studio. Not the foundation, not the office, just a narrow storefront I'd quietly closed on 2 days earlier. No one knew about it yet. That was the point. Tall windows, scuffed floors, echoes in every corner. It smelled like dust, old paint, and the kind of beginnings that didn't ask for permission. Inside the envelope Grandpa had marked final, I found a folded business plan half complete, with notes in his handwriting suggesting a training center for women vets for career shifts, for starting over. He'd written, "Some legacies aren't inherited. They're built brick by brick." I spread the plan across the floor and started mapping it. Budget columns, outreach goals, renovation estimates. My handwriting didn't match his, but the mission did. I didn't build it out of revenge. I didn't build it for applause. I built it so no one would have to claw their way out of a grave their family dug for them. A week later, the final paperwork cleared. The studio became the pilot site for Greaves Forward, a transitional hub for women leaving military service. Counseling, career guidance, housing referrals. No flag waving, no slogans, just ground beneath your feet, and people who didn't flinch when you talked about the dark. Dean offered to help run the programming. Nash wanted to write a piece on the launch, but I told him to hold it. Let it grow quiet first. Let it grow real. I didn't need the story anymore. I had the building, the work, the peace that comes when no one is trying to silence you mid-sentence. One morning I passed Harper on the street near the foundation. She saw me, paused, didn't wave, didn't speak. Good. I didn't hate her, but I didn't know her space in a life she tried to sign away. That same day, I got a letter from Tori, who'd been dishonorably discharged for speaking up about harassment in her unit. She'd found our website. She didn't ask for money. She asked for someone who'd listen. I called her that night. We talked for 2 hours. It's not about trauma, just about where to begin. When we hung up, I wrote her name at the top of a fresh file. Client 0001. And that was it. Not an ending. Not a victory lap. Just a door opening that no one could close behind me this time. I stood at the studio window later that evening, watching the streetlights flicker to life. The glass still had streaks. The floor still needed refinishing. But the space was mine. And I didn't need to reclaim the past. I was busy laying down the future. One brick, one name, one decision they'd never get to rewrite. The heater kicked on behind me with a low hum, and I didn't move, didn't rush, didn't rehearse a speech for anyone who might ask how I got here. Because the answer wasn't complicated. They tried to erase me, and I built something they couldn't touch. No spotlight, no throne, just a foundation made from what they tried to burn. One that would outlive every lie they told. If this story hit home, drop a comment below. I want to hear your battles, your rebuilds, and your victories. And if you believe in quiet justice and legacies they can't erase, hit that like button and subscribe. Let's make sure these stories don't stay buried. Welcome to the fight. Welcome to the foundation.